document that I revere called the Declaration of Independence. But if you look at American history, you see a perpetual testimony to a declaration of interdependence, that we need each other. We must work together. We must find a way to not only live together, but to push forward and be together. In fact, that story I told you is an Exhibit A in what the challenges are if we do not follow that African proverb that says if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. In this world, we're all on the plane, and this ain't United Airlines. Life is not United Airlines. If the plane crashes, we all go down. If there's a hole in the fuselage, it affects us all. You all will be on the front lines of being the conscience of communities, to helping people realize what is truly important and how we must be first class together. The second story I tell you very briefly is a story about truly keeping your eyes on the big vision, but about what is truly important. It's a very personal story from that matriarchal tradition, Unvarnished Truth. When I was getting ready to run for mayor, in the years before my second election, first one I lost, and yet I was determined with other residents of the city to try again. I had been living in a place called Brick Towers on High Street, right near Martin Luther King Boulevard. It was one of the best communities I have ever lived in my life. I met giants and heroes of people that kept that community together despite a slum war, or eventually became public housing, and the housing authority was not doing right. We had no heat and no hot water, but people were banding together in the winter, getting space heaters for families that couldn't afford them. In the summertime, working to find activities for kids. It was a great community. And in the lobby of that building, I watched kids all the time. Some kids I had known, they were getting older and older, and I would come home late at night, and now these young high school kids were hanging out in the lobby, and I used to enjoy it. I would come home and spend a few minutes in the lobby just talking to them, and this group of kids had one leader. I love this kid because he reminded me so much of my dad. He had my father's quick wit, my father's sense of humor, my father's charisma, and his leadership ability. And so I began to see those signs that I did not like. Some of the kids were starting to show colors, and I was worried they were getting involved with the Bloods. And sometimes I'd come home and I would smell marijuana in the lobby, and I started thinking to myself, I better do something about this. So I invited the kids out to a movie. They said, really? I said, yeah, any movie you want to go. And I thought they were about to take me to a home improvement movie, because they said they wanted to go see this movie called Saw. And I was like, that sounds like a home improvement film. And so we went to the movies. I took them to diners and dinner, and I started bringing friends of mine who had been involved in the drug trade but had seen the perils and had gotten out, turned their lives around. But something happened. As I got closer to the mayor's race, I got busy because, hell, I was important. I was going for that big prize. I was going for that big challenge. I was doing something so important that I got busy. And I couldn't take time to follow up with these kids. I couldn't take the time to actually be there, to connect the dots for them. And soon I stopped taking them out. Soon I stopped connecting them with mentors. And I just kept coming home. And I'll tell you, the spirit of those kids never died. As the campaign got going, they were sometimes the respite I was looking for at the end of a hard day, teasing me and joking with me when I came home. One night I'll never forget. Right before the election, I came home, and they had lawn signs, like a dozen of them, just waving them at me, chanting as I walked in, and I walked in like a conquering hero from a long day of campaigning, and then I thought to myself, where did they get these lawn signs from? Well, I was elected mayor, and now I was so important. The mission was obvious. In 2006, violent crime in our city was spiking to record levels, and I was called to this great cause and mission. When I would come home at night, there would be police officers with me, and the kids didn't want to hang out in that lobby anymore. So I didn't even see them, but I wasn't even thinking about that because I was on an important mission. That first month in office, every time there was a shooting in the city, I was showing up, whether it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock at night, running around our city telling people, this is not who we are. We are better than this. This is not a reflection of our love, of our spirit, of our strength. We can overcome this. talking to people. I was the mayor, and people were paying attention to every word I had to say. And as I got going into this effort, I feeling this mission so important, so big was I, that one day I showed up 1 month into my term on Court Street in Newark, and there was a shooting. One body was being covered on the sidewalk. One person was being put into an ambulance, and all I could do was console residents and talk to them and be mayoral. I was the mayor on that street, telling people that we would fight through this, that we would drive crime down. And I went home late that night, and I pulled out my BlackBerry, the last thing I was to do for the day, and I was going through incident reports, and there I saw something that shook me to my core. I looked at my BlackBerry, and I couldn't break my gaze because I saw the name of the boy that was killed on Court Street. It was the young man from the lobby of my building. The young man who was so much like my dad. Born in a segregated environment, born poor, born to a single mother, but like my dad, he had that spirit, that courage, that charisma, that strength. I couldn't break my eyes from the BlackBerry, and my hands started to shake. I wanted it to change. I prayed that name was not right. I began to feel haunted as I looked, and I'll tell you, I'll never forget at Perry's funeral home. When we all crowded in that funeral home, everybody was there. There were parents and community activists, there were politicians and young people, there were people from my buildings, there were folks from the neighborhood. Everybody was there. But suddenly, a month into my new job, I did not feel mayoral. All I could do was stand in the back of Perry's funeral home. I felt this darkness just gripping my heart. I felt like a little boy surrounded by big things that seemed so large and uncomprehendable. People came over to me, and I couldn't cater to their sorrow or their sadness. I could just mumble out things, and as I saw more and more people come in, I felt the words of our common ancestry haunt me. Not inspire me, they were haunting me. Like the words of Martin Luther King that said, "We must repent in today's age, not for the violent actions and vitriolic words of the bad people, but the appalling silence and inaction of the good people." I was a good person. God had put a boy right in front of my face every single day, but I was so important, so busy chasing after my big goal, that I could not do the small things that could have helped that kid change his trajectory. I couldn't handle it anymore, and I left the funeral home. Before the services were over, I raced to City Hall. I climbed the steps and went into this new office of mine, this palatial offices, where legendary names had sat. All I could do was lock the door and find a corner to sit down and begin to cry. Graduates of 2013, I'm going to tell you right now, you will have days like this. I'm sorry to tell you, but you will have days where a seemingly unconquerable sadness will overtake you. You will have days when the weight of shame presses so hard upon your chest that you feel as if you can barely get out of bed. I tell you, you're going to have days like this, where something happens that you didn't ask for, but it will visit your life and shake you to the core of your being. But I'm going to tell you this. These can be the most valuable points in your life. Nothing is a failure. Failure is not final if you just keep going. And when you're down there on your knees, when you're at the depth of the well, know this, that's when you will find your greatest treasures. That's when you will find the lessons that most keep you going during the good times. And when I was down there on the floor of pain, I tell you, I realized that true courage has nothing to do with giving a big speech or running into a burning building. That true courage is that when you are so discouraged, when pain grips you, when sorrow is holding on with a tenacious grasp, that true courage is that small voice inside of you that tells you to keep going anyway. So when I was there on my first month as mayor, the lesson I grabbed, the jewel that I found at the bottom of the well was one simple thing. And I tell you this with all of my heart, knowing that this is your profession. I tell you this lesson knowing that you exhibit this already. The simple lesson is this: you can have big dreams and big goals, but never forget the biggest thing you can do in any day is a small act of kindness, decency, and love. That life ultimately is not about the big things in the future, it's about the small things now. That love is not a destination, it is a way to travel. Mahatma Gandhi showed us this. He was taking on the British Empire. He was doing the work of a continent. And as he was running for a train one day, he leapt upon the train and one of his sandals fell off on the tracks, and everybody watched in sorrow that the great Mahatma Gandhi lost a sandal, but Mahatma Gandhi had a reflex too. His reflex reached down and pulled his other sandal off and tossed it way out in the tracks. His aide that was with him said, why did you do that? Mahatma Gandhi, with simplicity and kindness at his core, looks at the aide perplexed and goes, why? Because whoever finds that one sandal, wouldn't it be great if they find that other sandal too? This is the truth of life. Life is exhibited in the small moments when you take time. Something as simple as seeing someone without a smile and giving them yours. I have seen that kindness. I've known how it's been transformative to me. I've seen how it can affect a life, that one thing you do that you don't even think about can take someone from a difficult time and help them in their hearts to turn despair into hope, darkness into light, a barrier into blessing. That's the power we have, but we don't exercise it. Alice Walker said the most common way we give up our power is not realizing we have it in the first place. And so I want to end with just telling you about that power. About me standing in a home, a hospice care center. The kindness of nurses that I found there. And the person that was dying in that hospice center was a giant in my life. This is just recently. His name was Frank Hutchins. Frank is one of the Newark's greatest tenant leaders of all time. I met him when I was a young law student moving to Newark, and he embraced me as a young lawyer that could help him take on slumlords and fight for tenant rights. He was my hero because he, in my early stages of my professional career, taught me so much. And he saw things in me, envisioned, he saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And so we had battles together, we had fights together. I served at his side, this noble man. And as he got older, I'm telling you this, the days go so slowly, but the years fly by. And as I watched the years take the toll, Frank started getting sicker, and eventually his eyesight went, but he was still so joyous. Every time I'd see him, I'd say, Frank, it's Corey. And he would say the same thing every time we met. It almost became a game. He used to say, I see you, Corey. I see you. This man without vision still wanted to do the things with me. He's like, man, let's keep going to the movies. I just want to hear the screen and what's going on. And I said, well, I know this great home improvement movie. Let's go see Saw 5 together. But yes, his health failed, and now suddenly I was visiting this hospice center right here in Essex County, and I tell you, I'll never forget the kindness of the nurses who came to me and encouraged me to keep coming, and told me that sometimes he would only eat when I would show up, so I would always bring food, and they kept me informed about what was going on, and on what they told me would probably be the last day, they let me have a moment alone with him in his room, and I walked into his room, and I said a lot, but he only said two things. When I left that room, and the nurses saw me, and one of them hugged me. I'll never forget, she hugged me. She saw my pain, but I held on as I remember the two things he said. One thing he said, and his last words to me was, I love you. But the other thing he said, which was so beautiful to me, he said, Corey,